Good morning, students. I welcome you to this module, Life Skills, Science and Technology, Teaching in the Foundation Phase. This module code for this module is LSK3701. If you would like to correspond with me, your lecturer, you're welcome to do so using the email address on the screen. Remember, you always need to include your module name, your own name, and your student number in your communication, as LSK3701 is not my only module. Another important thing I need to discuss with you is the problem with Gmail accounts. I constantly get emails using your Gmail accounts, and it's a UNISA policy that you need to communicate via your My Life UNISA account. Reason being, the POPI Act has been passed in July, and it's imperative that we follow protocol with regards to email communication, and it's obviously to protect your own privacy as well. So please, let's cooperate in terms of this. You might find that I don't reply to your emails when you continue to email through your Gmail accounts. Okay, so I always advise my students to begin with the end in mind. What I mean by this is whenever you need to prepare, for a new module, you need to start well in advance and decide what results do I want to achieve. It's always good to aim high because that's when you actually do quite well in your module. So you're advised to start preparing, well in advance in terms of, preparing for the examination. The study guide forms the main material, in terms of studying. There's no prescribed material for LSK 3701. In this case, you need to ensure that you work through your assignments, your activities, your self-assessment questions. They all play an important part, in the preparation process, as they've been compiled in such a way that you work through all the relevant content systematically. So always keep in mind that it is in your best interest to study consistently throughout the year. Just because it's an online exam, currently that's what we're facing, but it does not mean that you should not start studying well in advance, especially if you want to be able to understand your content, interpret it, apply it to different contexts or whatever questions you may experience in your exam. So draw up a study program, stick to it, prepare the questions, especially try to focus it on application of knowledge rather than just, swatting through the content. That won't help you at all. You should analyze each question, establish what is expected of you. So many students begin to answer questions by paging through the study guide and, trying to copy and paste. And this, I repeat, is plagiarism. When you try to give off other examples as your own ideas, using the study guide. And please, students, I would advise you not to risk this. So we're looking at assessment. I know I've gone through this in previous presentations, but it's important that you understand that assignment 1 is compulsory and is deemed your exam admission, which is an MCQ assignment. Most of you fared well in this assignment. Assignment 2 is an essay type question, which is also compulsory for LSK 3701. It expected more application, more interpretation, and you are able to create your own lesson plan, which is a good preparation for your examination. If you come to online examination, that's your main, is basically bulk of your mark. 80% of your mark, your assignment, whereas your assignment counts for 20% of your year mark. So I do hope that you entering the exam with a high year mark so that it works for your benefit in your final result. Okay, so when we're talking about problems with submissions, I think it's important that I go through this with you in terms of, the examination. If you're going to try to send me an email of your exam, just expect that there's no joy going to come out of it because it's not acceptable, especially UNISA has not accepted email assignments. Everything goes through the JRouter and through the My Exams platform, and this is how it will be marked. So remember, if you upload an incorrect assignment or if it's your exam, if it's incorrect, it means that you will fail the module. There is no way that we would accept anything after the required time allocated to the exam. Corrupt files, it's also your responsibility to ensure that your file is markable, that that the document is in good order. You are allowed to preview your submission, and this entirely is a student's responsibility. When it comes to plagiarism, again, I want to remind you that there is strict policies in terms of plagiarism. You will obviously get your warning, go through disciplinary investigations, and it does not end well for you in your academic career. So please do not ever risk it. It's not worth it. Do not wait until the last day, an hour, to upload your assignments. Well, this is in terms of the assignments. We noticed that many of you have last minute issues. Also with the exam, obviously you need to use your full time period, but make sure you don't wait for the last minute and the submission closes. When you talk about the application of knowledge, I like to go over this with you because I want to remind you that there's different levels of questioning from level 1 to 6. But like I said, because of it being an online exam, we focus more on the higher level questioning, which means we are more worried about the application of your knowledge in terms of solving problems, comparing, explaining, categorizing, justifying, planning, creating, recommending, whatever it may be. The level of questioning is obviously higher, especially at this level. You're at NQ level 7. Okay, so outline of this module, the learning unit 4, which is a problem-solving nature of technology education. And then you have digital technology and planning for technology, teaching and assessment. This is very important as technology has, has taken over our lives, and especially in the schooling career. Due to the COVID situation, most schools have opted to go online in order to continue educating learners. Okay, so the purpose of this module, I like to go over the purpose so that you know what this module is about. If you complete this module successfully, you'll be able to teach relevant concepts, process skills that are related to science and technology within the foundation phase curriculum. And you will also be able to engage with your foundation phase learners, to experiment, to explore the world using basic process skills such as observing, classifying, experimenting, drawing conclusions, communicating, and all of that we've gone through in previous units. Furthermore, you will develop self-reflective practices to be able to mediate the science and technology curriculum through application of appropriate teaching strategies and technologies to suit different contexts. Remember, we live in a world that we have to consider the context of, of the situations. And that's how, students can understand the world and understand how to basically solve problems. So resources for mediation will be obtained from different sources, especially as a foundation phase educator, and whether any educator in any other phase, you need to ensure that you use different sources, to ensure that they are able to relate to different contexts that they may find themselves in. Okay, so this module is divided into 2 sections, which is learning unit 1 to 3, which is science education. We've done this previously in the previous presentation, and now we're looking at technology education, which is learning unit 4 to 6. Okay, so and a basic outline of this presentation is I'd like you to be familiar before you start going into the units. Learning unit 4 is basically problem-solving nature of technology, the design process as taught in technology education, the content areas for technology education, and obviously language and mathematics in technology education. When you come to learning unit 5, we're looking more at the fourth industrial revolution, the digital technology and digital childhood, which is important for us as teachers to understand. And what does digital literacy mean, and the 21st century skills needed, for effective teaching in this technological era, and digital resources for foundation phase, as well as the TPAC. We learn more about this. And when you come to learning unit 6, the design process skills, theme plan based on stages of design process, integration within theme plan. It's very important, especially in the assignment. Some of you were unable to, work within your theme plan to develop a technological activity or creative activity. Also, in terms of assessment in technology education, all of these are very important in science and technology teaching. Okay, so let's look at learning unit 4. So this is the first unit in the technology section. It's a problem-solving nature of technology. So on completion of this learning unit, you should be able to analyze and evaluate problem-based scenarios as a basis for planning appropriate solutions. Remember, there's so many problems, scenarios that you could show to your students and, derive an activity that in a way where they can solve the issue and find practical solutions. Apply appropriate problem-solving strategies, using examples, plan and write paragraphs to communicate ideas. Remember, in the language aspect, communicating ideas and opinions are very important, especially when it comes to technological literacy, using appropriate academic and professional discourse, and analyzing and interpreting and making comparisons of different teaching approaches, in terms of technological problem solving, integration of mathematics, language, creativity, and also using the cultural historical perspective. So it's very important for you as a teacher to work through all these different teaching approaches, identify suitable context for the application of these approaches, and then again, identify the strengths and limitations of each approach. So it's very important for you as an educator to know the strengths and limitations of each approach, and suggest ways in which approaches can be used successfully in the foundation phase. There's sometimes as a foundation phase educator, you need to be a bit more creative. It depends on your students. It depends on the context. What resources do you have available in your school? Use examples to cite the use of an approach that is appropriate for the learning context that you are in. Some schools have better resources than others, and you need to work within that. Okay, so we're looking at what is important for you to understand in this unit is what is technology education, what is technology, what is technological literacy, and what is Indigenous knowledge. So remember, the technology education in South African curriculum has the design. You need to understand the design process and technological skills, the information technology with the focus of information processing skills, which I learned in these units. We'll go to this more in detail now and what is expected. So when it comes to technology education in the South African curriculum, remember, you need to be able to name the two current curriculum policies, in policy documents. You need to understand what do these two current policy documents outline. As an educator, you need to understand this, especially when you're getting a job. They would ask you a question like this, especially if you're teaching science and technology. What are the 7 aims of teaching and learning in terms of the type of learners that should be produced? And also, what 3 learning outcomes for technology education described by the National Curriculum Statement, Technology Education, within the NCS, the South Africa 2002B. And also in the foundation phase, teachers are required to teach the technological processes and skills in learning outcome 1 only. So you need to know the 3 outcomes. And also in foundation phase, teachers are required to teach the technological processes and skills only in learning outcome 1. So just remember that the outcome states that learners will be able to apply the technological processes and skills ethically and responsibly using appropriate information and communication technologies. So it's not expected that foundation phase need to go right to the 3rd outcome. What do learners engage in during technological activities? You need to understand what is the process skills used together. What is it known as? And also you need to be able to show the relationship between the design process and the information technology in technology education curriculum in South Africa. And you need to be able to define technology. Like I said earlier, what does technology find solutions to? What does technology integrate? How does it integrate with technological literacy? So remember, when we're talking about the aim of teaching and learning is to produce learners who are able to use critical and creative thinking, work effectively as individuals, and with others as a team. We need to instill this with them, organize and manage themselves and their activities responsibly, communicate effectively using visual and even language skills, and use science and technology effectively and creatively to help the environment or help others. We need to consider context that help them deal with certain situations in life. So demonstrate an understanding of world-related systems, recognizing problem-solving context, all of that form part of technology education. So if you're going to read more about this, you'll have a better understanding and work through these questions while you're going through this unit, this section, because it makes it easier for you to understand the content working in a question-answer format, or asking yourself questions and reflecting on the content. Okay, so we're looking at technological literacy. Remember, we need to understand what is the purpose of technology education. Everything is kind of interrelated in terms of the 3 opportunities for learning. And you need to describe the study area, in terms of the beginning knowledge. Within this diagram, you can notice what technology education activities for the foundation phase is related on. What are the social science concepts that are related to this beginning knowledge? And you need to also be able to illustrate how technology education in the foundation phase is taught through the design process. Many students have created technology activities but not gone through the process, and that's where you lost marks as well in the assignment. So what learning activities does the South African curriculum require teachers to carry, in terms of developing technological literacy in young learners? In today's time, obviously, learners are in a very different level compared to the previous generation. They've been in this technological era from the day they were born, working with iPads at the young age of 1 or 2. So what is technological literacy? What is required for people to become technologically literate? And what is important for you to remember? There's some risk when it comes to technology, and especially on young children. And what is the design process about? So here I would like to ensure that you understand that when it comes to technological literacy, remember, it's developing students' ability to apply specific skills and understanding concepts and knowledge using technology, and also develop an appreciation for that interaction between, people's values and attitudes, technology, society, environment. So it's very important for you to understand that. And if you look at this diagram, it's just a brief diagram of what is, the learning outcome 1, like I spoke about earlier, that is expected in foundation phase, and how those concepts of, from that beginning knowledge from the CAPS document in terms of the outcomes 2 and 3. And this forms the technology education activities for foundation phase with a focus on design process. So it's in stages that they develop this technology literacy skill. Okay, so now we're looking at the problem-solving nature of technology. It's very important that you understand what is at the heart of the design process, in terms of what is being developed in the problem-solving process, especially when you're working with your activities. You need students to understand how to, work with steps to solve a problem, basically. And what is the ultimate goal of problem solving? To find a solution, whether it's a leaking tap or littering, there's always a solution that needs to be done in order to improve the situation. So what does the best strategy for solving a problem depend largely on? And you also need to illustrate the simplified version of problem-solving process. There's 5 steps. This is just an explanation, of the steps, but we will go through it in the next slide as well. And what is the similarity and difference between the problem-solving steps and the design process? It's very important that you understand the difference here. The steps to solve problems, remember, firstly, you're identifying the problem. Secondly, you're developing alternatives. There must be some selection that you need to choose from. Then you select the best alternative, then you implement it, and then you need to reflect. Did the solution work? Yes. Have a reason? No. Have a reason, and reflect how you can do things better or whatever it is. Okay, so now we're looking at the design process as taught in technology education. So now we look at what does the South African curriculum require learners to develop. It's very important that you understand that. How does the NCST of South Africa 2002 B6 describe the design process, and what are the skills needed in this design process? And you need to be able to illustrate the expanded steps of the design process, as well as identify the 5 steps used in problem solving. That's also something that's commonly asked. So consider a problem for a young learner when you're studying, consider a problem for a young learner to solve and use the 5 steps in the design process. Explain as the steps in the problem solving process, in terms of investigate. The first one would be investigate, then it would be design, make, evaluate, and communicate. So remember, when you investigate, what are you doing? You are identifying the problem. It may seem like an obvious step. Identifying the problem is not always simple. I notice many students do find it difficult in terms of noting that, whether it be from a text or whatever it is. So one must be very clear about what the problem is, defining the problem. After the problem has been identified, it is very important to completely define the problem, so that it can be solved, and then, you understand the issues that need to be solved as well, because you've defined it, you've identified it. When we talk about design, remember, you're forming a strategy to solve the problem. So the approach used will depend on the context, and the individual's unique preferences. Everyone is different. Everyone has some students may have more creative ideas to organize information. So, look at what's available, maybe research some more information so that you can make a more informed decision, and allocating, resources. It's not always practical and realistic to, have the most expensive options. So you need to look at those things as well. When we talk about make, remember, this is implementing and monitoring the progress. So once obviously you decide on, an action has been decided on, it must obviously be implemented, and the process needs to be monitored. You can't just expect everything to, just work out in that way. You need to be constantly working on the progress, monitoring the situation. If they are not making good progress towards reaching the goal, you need to look for new strategies at the stage. And then when it comes to evaluating, what do you do when you evaluate? So after a solution has been reached, remember, it is important to evaluate the results to determine if the best possible solution has been met for the problem. And then when we talk about communicate, like I said, when it comes to the language and communication, so the ability to analyze, investigate, plan, design. Okay, so now we're looking at evaluate. And at this step, you basically, after a solution has been reached, it is important to evaluate the results to determine whether it's the best possible solution, whether it's working or not, to solve the problem. And then you go on to step 5, which is to communicate. Remember, communicating is essentially part of the language integration, in terms of the ability to analyze, to investigate, to plan, to design, to draw, evaluate, and then eventually they're communicating now. And it's in terms of language, we're talking about oral, written, graphic, electronic form. It just depends how they're going to portray, the solution to the problem. So it's a very important step. And I think when it comes to communicating, this is when you can, draw up maybe a worksheet or whatever it is so that they can communicate the problem. Okay, so let's look at the creativity and design process. So what does the design process encourage? Do you think creative thinking is important in technology education? You need to understand this and give a reason for this. What is creativity? How does Neyman 2014 describe creativity, and what is creativity characterized as? And also the two processes involved, in terms of creativity, you need to understand that, and what art activities do for learners. Remember, these are foundation phase learners. So you need to ensure that create activities that are fun, that are created motivation for them to want to learn more. And what is creative thinking based on, basically, and how does causal reasoning take place during creative thinking? And what type of learners are the South Africa's curriculum aimed at developing? You need to take all of this into consideration when working through the section. What do you understand by this, and how do you develop a vision for this in learners? I would say that, whenever you're doing an activity, I think the previous assignment had a creativity activity where you have to work according to your theme plan. So it's not just about drawing, and it's about drawing and understanding, or creating something that would give them a better understanding of the content or the theme plan that we're following. Okay, so when we're talking about Indigenous knowledge and technological problem solving, when you're working through the section, just remember Indigenous knowledge is very important, especially you need to understand what type of knowledge needs to be considered as a creative way to solve a modern problem. Define Indigenous knowledge according to certain authors, define technology, explain why Indigenous knowledge is relevant for technology education, and describe the characteristics of Indigenous knowledge. So remember, a creative way of solving a modern problem is often possible if one considers Indigenous knowledge. Remember, Indigenous knowledge is a way of knowing and doing, in terms of local people, how they developed through the ages as they were going about, their everyday activities. And why is it relevant for technology education? You need to think about this. Technology is a way of solving problems, like we talked about, developing and making products and systems, and throughout all ages, humankind is faced with many problems. Think about the Stone Age. Think about, in terms of food, shelter, health, keeping warm or cool, and so forth. So these problems are all solved by developing solutions from resources that are available in a particular area. And that's why you need to consider Indigenous knowledge, in terms of people living in a certain area. So it's based on experience, It's something that's been tested over centuries. It's a collective database of observable knowledge. It is dynamic and changing, and it's based on application of problem solving, which is very important in technology. So it's something that you need to understand, and be able to work this into your lessons, considering Indigenous knowledge. So students know what works and what doesn't. Okay, so now we're looking at the content areas for technology education. This is also, remember, there are 3 learning strands for technology education in the South African curriculum. And like I said, it's the technological processing, systems and control structures. And you need to be able to describe each learning strand in detail with relevant examples. And consider also the curriculum topics in the foundation phase and how to integrate the big ideas that we spoke about previously within the science content, technology content, and some context of the design activities. So this is very important to understand. You can work through it in unit 4, and it's always better to work through this content with examples so that you have a better understanding of how to apply your knowledge. Okay, and like we've said previously, language and technology education is very important. You need to understand what happens when language is integrated into technology education. We've seen in the steps previously that at the end, they need to be able to communicate how they're going to solve the problem, in terms of whatever it may be. Language is important in science and technology. They need to describe how science activities can incorporate language using relevant examples. It's very important that you work through the content with examples, like I said, in order for you to be able to apply your knowledge. Using examples on how language can be used in the design process activities are very important. Remember, integrating language into technology education leads to conceptual development, basically, in respect of, the language that is used. And you can refer back to unit 1 in terms of this. So during science activities, learners are obviously using scientific words with scientific meanings, and all of this are developed through language. Likewise, in technology as well. When we talk about mathematics and technology education, you're describing how mathematical concepts in terms of space, shape, measurement are developed in the design process. So remember, it's very important, especially in technology, if you're building, something to help solve a problem, mathematics is always, required in that case.